Learn to disappear. You've felt it before. That pull. That quiet voice inside you that whispers, "What if I just vanished?" Not forever. Not literally. But what if you could disappear from the noise? From the expectations? From the version of yourself that everyone else built for you, without your permission? What if you could step away from who you've been, and reappear as who you were always meant to be? That's what this video is about. I'm going to walk you through something I call the disappearance method, a complete framework for shedding your old identity, stepping into silence, rebuilding yourself from nothing, and re-emerging with absolute clarity about who you are and what you want. This isn't a motivational speech. This is a map. Stay with me. Open Book Part 1: Why You Need to Disappear. Let's start with the truth most people don't want to hear. The life you're living right now? A large part of it wasn't chosen by you. Your habits were shaped by your childhood environment. Your beliefs were installed by people who meant well, but who were also broken. Your goals might actually be someone else's goals wearing your face. And the terrifying part? Most people never question any of it. They just keep running the program. So ask yourself honestly, when was the last time you sat in complete silence and asked, "Who am I, without all of this?" Not your job. Not your relationships. Not your reputation. Not your social media presence. Not your past. Just you. Stripped bare. Most people can't answer that question. And that's not a failure, that's a symptom. A symptom of a life that never stopped long enough to let you catch up to it. Here's what I've discovered: disappearing is not running away. Disappearing is the act of removing yourself from the constant external noise long enough to hear your own signal again. Think about the greatest transformations in history. Before Buddha became enlightened, he disappeared into the forest. Before Moses led a nation, he disappeared into the desert for 40 years. Before Jesus began his ministry, he disappeared for 40 days. Before every great artist, inventor, philosopher, or leader stepped into greatness, there was a period of withdrawal. This isn't coincidence. This is the pattern. You cannot rebuild what you cannot first deconstruct. And you cannot deconstruct yourself while you're still performing for an audience. So the first step, the first thing you have to accept, is this. You are allowed to disappear. You are allowed to step back. You are allowed to stop performing. You are allowed to say, "Not right now. I'm in the process of becoming." Write that down if you need to. You are allowed to disappear. Open Book Part 2: The 5 Layers of the False Self. Now, before you can disappear, you need to understand what you're disappearing from. I call these the 5 layers of the false self. And almost everyone is carrying at least 3 of them. Layer 1: the performed self. This is the version of you that exists for other people. The curated social media you. The professional LinkedIn you. The "I'm doing great, thanks for asking" you. This self is exhausting because it requires constant maintenance. You have to remember which version of the story you told to which person. You have to keep the mask aligned. You have to be consistent with a character you invented, often under pressure, often in pain. The performed self is not evil. It's survival. But when survival becomes your permanent mode, you stop actually living. Layer 2: the wounded self. This is the part of you that was shaped by your deepest hurts. Your earliest abandonments. Your most humiliating failures. Your most crushing rejections. The wounded self doesn't just carry pain, it makes decisions from pain. It keeps you small because small felt safe once. It pushes people away because being close meant being hurt. It sabotages your success because somewhere deep down, it doesn't believe you deserve it. Until you meet your wounded self, until you actually sit with it and hear it, it will keep running the show from backstage. Layer 3: the borrowed self. You know that dream you've been chasing? That goal you've been grinding toward? Ask yourself honestly, is that actually mine? Because a lot of us are living borrowed lives. We inherited ambitions from our parents. We adopted the values of the culture we grew up in. We took on the expectations of a partner, a community, a religion, and somewhere along the way, We forgot to ask ourselves what we actually wanted. The borrowed self is dangerous because it looks like motivation. It looks like drive. But it leads you to the top of a ladder leaning against the wrong wall. Layer 4, the reactive self. This is the version of you that responds to life rather than creating it. The self that is defined by what happened to you. The self that says, I am this way because of them. I am stuck because of what was done to me. The reactive self hands its power over to the past. And as long as you live from this layer, you will keep recreating the same patterns, the same relationships, the same outcomes, because you haven't yet chosen a different story. Layer 5, the numb self. This is perhaps the most dangerous layer of all. The numb self has stopped feeling, not because it's healed, but because feeling became too much. So it went to work. Or scrolled endlessly. Or stayed busy on purpose. Or drank. Or chased external validation. Anything to avoid the silence where the real feelings live. The numb self mistakes emptiness for peace. It calls avoidance being practical. It calls disconnection not being dramatic. Here's the truth: you cannot heal what you refuse to feel. And you cannot find yourself until you're willing to face the versions of yourself you've been hiding from. That's the 5 layers. And the work of disappearing, the real work, is slowly, deliberately peeling them back. Open Book Part 3, How to Disappear, the 7 Practices. Alright. Now we get into the actual method. I want to be clear: disappearing is not about going off-grid forever. You don't need to move to a cabin in the mountains. You don't need to quit your job tomorrow. What you need is a practice. A daily, intentional act of stepping out of the noise and back into yourself. Here are the 7 practices of the disappearance method. Practice 1, the morning silence protocol. Every morning, before you touch your phone, before you check messages, emails, social media, news, you sit in complete silence for a minimum of 15 minutes. No music. No podcast. No guided meditation app. Just you and the quiet. This is harder than it sounds. Because the moment you sit in silence, everything you've been avoiding will start rushing in. The anxiety. The unresolved grief. The questions you don't have answers to. Let them come. You are not trying to silence your thoughts in these 15 minutes. You are trying to witness them. To see what surfaces when the noise stops. After a few days of this practice, you will start to notice patterns. Recurring fears. Repeating desires. Unfinished emotional business that has been waiting patiently for your attention. This is where the real work begins. Practice 2, the identity audit. Take a piece of paper, physical paper, not a phone note, and divide it into 2 columns. On the left side, write, who I am right now. List everything. Your roles. Your beliefs. Your habits. Your relationships. Your daily routines. Your values as you currently live them, not as you wish you lived them. On the right side, write, who I want to become. Now, and this is crucial, compare the 2 columns. Where is their alignment? Where is their total contradiction? The gap between those 2 columns is your roadmap. That gap tells you exactly what needs to change, what needs to be released, and what needs to be built. Most people never do this exercise because they're afraid of what they'll find. They're afraid the gap will be too large. They're afraid it will mean they've wasted years. But the gap isn't failure. The gap is clarity. And clarity is the beginning of everything. Practice 3, the digital fast. Pick 1 day per week. And on that day, you go completely offline. No social media. No email. No news. No YouTube. No streaming. Just your life. Just the physical, sensory, present moment reality of your actual existence. I know this sounds extreme. We live in a world that has convinced us that constant connectivity is normal, even necessary. But constant connectivity is one of the most powerful tools ever designed for keeping you out of yourself. Every notification is a leash. Every scroll is a distraction. Every comparison you make online is a tiny theft of your own peace. The weekly digital fast isn't about rejecting technology forever. It's about remembering that you existed before it. That your thoughts are your own. That silence is not empty, it's full of everything you've been too distracted to notice. Practice 4. Writing to the void. Every evening, before sleep, write for 10 minutes without stopping. No editing. No rereading. No judgment. Just let the pen move. Write about what you felt that day. What you noticed. What hurt. What surprised you. What you're afraid of. What you're hoping for. What you're pretending not to want. The act of writing is the act of listening to yourself. And most of us have been so busy talking, performing, presenting, responding, that we've forgotten how to listen to what's actually happening inside us. After 30 days of this practice, you will have a document more honest and revealing than any therapy session. You will see yourself clearly. Maybe for the first time. Practice 5. Ending one relationship that is keeping you small. This one is uncomfortable. But it is necessary. Look at your closest relationships. And ask yourself honestly, who in my life profits from me staying exactly as I am? Because here's the hard truth, not everyone in your life wants you to grow. Some people, consciously or not, have a stake in your smallness. Your growth threatens their sense of themselves. Your transformation reminds them of what they haven't done. These people will resist your disappearance. They will call it selfish. They will call it irresponsible. They will call it going through a phase. You don't have to cut everyone off dramatically. But you do need to become intentional about who gets access to the new version of you that is being born. Protect your becoming. Not everyone deserves a front row seat. Practice 6. Learning something that terrifies you. Part of disappearing and reappearing is the deliberate expansion of your identity. Most of us stop learning new things, truly new things, things that make us feel like beginners again, somewhere in our 20s. We get comfortable in our competence. We avoid the feeling of being a novice. But the beginner's mind is a sacred thing. There is something that happens to your identity when you are genuinely learning. When you are struggling. When you are bad at something and doing it anyway. Pick one thing you've always wanted to learn but told yourself you couldn't. A language. An instrument. A physical discipline. A craft. A skill. And begin. Not to master it. Not to perform it. Just to experience the feeling of growth. The feeling of your identity expanding beyond its current edges. You are not just one thing. You are not just your job or your role or your history. You are capable of becoming someone you haven't met yet. Prove that to yourself. Practice 7. The weekly disappearance. Once a week, for a minimum of 2 hours, go somewhere alone that has nothing to do with your regular life. A park. A trail. A beach. A library. A coffee shop in a neighborhood you've never been to. Go alone. No agenda. No productivity goal. Just exist somewhere unfamiliar. And notice what happens. Notice what thoughts arise when you're not performing for anyone. Notice what you're drawn to. Notice what feels peaceful and what feels restless. These 2 hours are not wasted time. These 2 hours are research. Research into who you actually are when no one is watching. The person you are when no one is watching, that is the real you. And that is the person worth building a life around. Open Book Part 4, The Reappearance. Who do you become? Let's talk about what happens on the other side. Because disappearing is not the destination. It is the passage. You don't disappear to stay gone. You disappear to come back different. And when you reappear, when you step back into your life after this process of stripping away and rebuilding, 3 things will have fundamentally changed. First, your relationship with approval. When you've spent enough time alone with yourself, when you've sat with your own silence long enough to become comfortable there, the desperate need for external approval begins to loosen its grip. You will still enjoy being appreciated. You will still care about certain relationships. But you will no longer need the validation of strangers to feel like your life is real or meaningful. This is a profound freedom. One that most people spend their entire lives chasing, and never find, because they're looking for it in the wrong direction. Approval is an outside-in strategy. What I'm describing is an inside-out life. Second, your relationship with failure. The person who has truly disappeared, who has sat with their wounds and their fears and their deepest inadequacies, is not afraid of failure in the same way anymore. Because they've already faced the worst version of themselves. They've already looked at the thing they were most ashamed of, the thing they were most afraid people would see, and they survived it. After that, failure is just information. It's data. It's a redirection. The person who has done this work doesn't fall apart when things go wrong. They get curious. They ask, what is this teaching me? What needs to change? What's being revealed? That is a superpower. And it is available to you, but only on the other side of the disappearance. Third, your relationship with time. When you stop performing a life and start actually living one, your relationship with time completely transforms. You stop feeling behind. You stop measuring yourself against timelines that were never yours to begin with. You stop asking, why don't I have what they have yet? Why am I not further along? Instead, you become deeply, almost radically present. Because when you are aligned, when your daily life is an expression of who you actually are, each day feels meaningful in itself. Not as a stepping stone to somewhere else. Not as a sacrifice for a future payoff. Just real. Just yours. That is the reappearance. Not a dramatic announcement. Not a viral moment. Not a rebrand. Just a quieter, more grounded, more authentic human being, walking through the world with their own compass instead of borrowing everyone else's. Open Book Part 5, The Fear That Will Try to Stop You. I want to be honest with you about something. Everything I've described in this video sounds powerful in theory. And it is. But when you actually try to do it, when you actually sit in the silence, write the honest words, face the wounded layers, end the draining relationship, you will encounter a specific kind of fear. It won't announce itself as fear. It will come dressed as logic. It will say, this is self-indulgent. You have responsibilities. Other people need you. This isn't the right time. What will people think? You're being dramatic. You don't actually need to change. Things aren't that bad. That voice is not wisdom. That voice is resistance. And it is the single biggest obstacle between you and the life you're actually capable of living. Stephen Pressfield calls it the resistance. Carl Jung called it the shadow. The spiritual traditions call it the ego. Whatever name you give it, it is the part of you that will fight hardest to keep everything exactly the same. Because change, even positive change, feels like death to the identity you've built. And your mind will do almost anything to avoid that feeling. So when that voice comes, and it will come, I want you to do something counterintuitive. Thank it. Say, thank you. I hear you. I know you're trying to protect me. And I'm going anyway. Because on the other side of that fear, on the other side of that resistance, is the version of you that you came here to be. You know it exists. You've felt it before, in moments of clarity, in moments of stillness, in moments when you were so present that you forgot to be afraid. That version of you is not a fantasy. It is not too late. It is not for other people. It is waiting for you. Right now. On the other side of the silence. Clapperboard. If you made it this far, you're not here by accident. Something in this resonated. Something in you recognized this. That recognition is not nothing. That's your inner self raising its hand and saying, yes. This is what I need. Honor that. Start tonight. Not with everything. Just with the 15 minutes of silence tomorrow morning. Just with one honest page in a journal. Just with one question you've been afraid to ask yourself. The journey of 1,000 miles begins with one step. But only if you actually take the step. If this video helped you, if it gave you something to think about, something to feel, something to act on, then I want you to do one thing. Subscribe to this channel. Not because I need the numbers. But because if this resonated, there is more where this came from. Every week, I go deep on the topics most people are afraid to touch. Reinvention. Identity. Solitude. Healing. Becoming. The kind of conversations that most people are only willing to have at 2 in the morning when they can't sleep. This channel exists for those conversations. If you're the kind of person who wants to think harder, live more honestly, and become someone you're actually proud of, then this is your place. Subscribe. Hit the bell. And I'll see you in the next one. Until then, go be quiet somewhere. You'll be surprised what you hear.